1 year after my wife died, I hired a contractor to renovate her old office just to keep myself busy, but I had just arrived at the church to visit her grave when the contractor called me, his voice trembling in a way that made my blood run cold. "Sir, I need you to see what we found behind the east wall, but do not come alone, bring your 2 sons. The fear in his voice was palpable. It wasn't the fear of an accident. It was the fear of a witness who had seen something he wasn't supposed to see. When I asked him if it was structural damage, he paused for a long second and whispered, "Sir, it is not the house that is broken. It is the lies holding it together." I hung up the phone, standing in the rain, looking at Catherine's headstone, and for the first time in 12 months, I didn't feel grief. I felt the cold steel of suspicion. I called my sons Brandon and Justin and told them to meet me at the estate immediately. They complained, of course, but they came thinking I had found a hidden safe full of gold. When we arrived, my heart nearly stopped, but not for the reason they expected. What was behind that wall would destroy our family forever. Before I continue this story, let me know which city you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to uncover a truth that everyone else wanted to keep buried. I am Douglas Bennett, 72 years old, and for the past year, I have been a ghost in my own life. I built skyscrapers in Chicago for 40 years. I designed foundations that could withstand earthquakes and winds of 100 miles per hour. But I could not design a foundation strong enough to hold my family together after Catherine passed away. Driving to the estate that morning, the rain lashed against the windshield of my 10-year-old sedan. The wipers beat a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was another notification from the bank. Transaction declined. $7 for a coffee at the gas station. Declined. I didn't need to look at the app to know why. Brandon had access to my primary accounts. He called it assisting with estate management. I called it a slow bleed. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. The humiliation of a declined card was nothing compared to the conversation we had just 3 days ago. The memory played in my head like a corrupted video file I couldn't delete. I was sitting in my armchair, reading the newspaper, when Brandon walked in with his wife, Nicole. They didn't knock. They never knocked anymore. Brandon dropped a glossy brochure onto my lap. It wasn't a gift. It was a brochure for Paradise Gardens assisted living facility. The colors were bright and cheerful, but the message was a death sentence. "Dad, we have been talking." Brandon said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "This house is too big for you. We are not spending another dime on this money pit," Nicole added, her eyes scanning the room with disdain. "In fact, Brandon and I have already contacted a demolition crew. They can start next Monday. Once you are settled in Paradise Gardens, we will liquidate this asset immediately." I didn't answer them. I walked over to Mike. I saw his knuckles were white as he gripped the sledgehammer handle. He wasn't looking at my sons. He was looking at me. "Is everyone here?" Mike asked, his voice low and gravelly. "Yes, Mike," I said calmly. "The whole family is here. Show them." Mike nodded. He didn't offer an explanation. He didn't give a preamble. He simply turned to the east wall. The wall looked solid. It was covered in vintage wallpaper that had started to peel. But Mike knew exactly where to strike. He lifted the heavy sledgehammer and swung it with practiced precision. Crack! The sound was like a gunshot in the confined space. Plaster and dust exploded into the air. He was thinking about all the things he could pay off with whatever his mother had hidden. "Move out of the way," Brandon pushed past me, shoving Mike aside. He grabbed the handle of the steel door. It wasn't locked. Catherine never locked things she wanted to be found. She only hid them until the right time. The door creaked open with a groan of heavy metal. A rush of cold, conditioned air hit us. It smelled of ozone and electronics. Brandon fumbled for a light switch inside. A strip of LED lights flickered on, bathing the hidden room in a harsh, clinical white glow. It wasn't a vault. There were no stacks of cash. There were no diamonds. The room was small, barely 6 feet wide. It was lined with soundproofing foam. On the left side, there was a wall of monitors, 12 screens in total. Most were dark, but 3 were active, showing live feeds. One showed the view of the room we were currently standing in. I saw myself on the screen looking old and tired. I saw Brandon's back as he stood in the doorway. On the right side of the room, there was a single metal filing cabinet. It was a heavy industrial fireproof model, and on top of the cabinet sat a single red notebook. "What is this garbage?" Brandon spat, his disappointment echoing in the small space. "Where is the money? This is just some kind of panic room." "No, sir," Mike said from behind me. His voice was steady but cold. "It is not a panic room. It is a listening post." I stepped forward, pushing Brandon gently aside to enter the room. I ran my hand over the cool metal of the filing cabinet. I knew what this was. Catherine had been the paranoid type in business, but I never knew she brought her work home. Or rather, I never knew she brought her suspicions home. I picked up the red notebook. The cover was worn. On the front, in Catherine's elegant handwriting, were the words, "Project Beekeeper." "Give me that." Brandon snatched the notebook from my hands. He was desperate to find something, anything of value. He flipped it open. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. I watched his face. I watched the arrogance drain away like water from a broken glass. I watched his skin turn a pale shade of gray. "What is it?" Nicole asked, trying to read over his shoulder. "Are there account numbers?" "No," Brandon whispered. His hands started to shake. It is a transcript. A transcript of what Justin asked, stepping closer, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. A transcript of us." Brandon looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw fear in his eyes. Pure, unadulterated fear. "Dad, how long has this been here?" "Read it, Brandon," I said, my voice surprisingly strong. Read page 154. The entry dated May 12th, 2 years ago. Brandon swallowed hard. He didn't want to read it. He knew what he had said that day, but he couldn't stop himself. He read aloud, his voice cracking. May 12th, dining room. Brandon speaking to Nicole. Subject, taking over the company. Quote, "The old woman has cancer. It is the best thing that could happen to us. We can funnel the pension fund into the Nevada project. By the time she dies, the money will be washed and clean. Dad is just a useless retired architect. He won't notice a thing until we put him in a home." End quote. Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. The only sound was the whirring of the cooling fans from the computer servers under the desk. Nicole covered her mouth with her hand. Megan took a step back, bumping into Justin. "That is a lie," Nicole screeched, her voice high and panicked. "We never said that. This is fake. You wrote this, old man. You are senile and making things up." I didn't argue. I simply pointed to the filing cabinet. "Open it," I commanded. Justin, paralyzed by what he had just heard, moved slowly toward the cabinet. He pulled the top drawer open. It was packed tight with hard drives and manila folders. He pulled out a folder with his name on it. He opened it. Photos spilled out. Photos of him at a casino in Las Vegas. Photos of him signing documents with a forgery of my signature. And a bank statement showing a transfer of $50,000 labeled crypto investment that went directly to a shell company owned by a loan shark. "This isn't happening," Justin muttered, dropping the folder. "This is illegal. You can't spy on us. This is entrapment." "Is it entrapment when you are stealing from your own mother?" Mike asked, stepping into the doorway, blocking their exit. "Or is it just quality control?" Brandon slammed the notebook shut. His face twisted from fear into rage. He looked at the monitors, then at the cabinet, then at me. "You planned this," he hissed. "You and this construction worker. You lured us here to blackmail us. Well, it won't work. Mom is dead. These are just scribbles in a notebook. They are inadmissible in court. He pulled a gold lighter from his pocket. She was sitting in this very chair, wearing her favorite blue silk blouse. She looked thin, the cancer had already taken its toll. But her eyes were sharp as diamonds. She looked directly into the camera lens. She looked directly at us from beyond the grave. "Hello, my boys." Catherine's voice filled the small room, clear and authoritative. "If you are watching this, it means your father has initiated the clean slate protocol." Brandon dropped the lighter. It hit the floor with a metallic clink, but the flame had already gone out. "I set up a dead man's switch," Catherine continued on the screen. "All the files in this room, all the recordings of your theft, your fraud, and your plans to abandon your father have been uploaded to a secure cloud server. The system requires a password to be entered every 24 hours by Douglas. If he misses a check-in or if he enters the distress code, the entire database will be automatically emailed to the IRS, the FBI, and the board of directors." On the screen, a digital timer appeared in the corner. It was counting down. 44 minutes and 30 seconds. "That is how long you have before the emails are sent," Catherine said with a sad smile. "Brandon Justin, I loved you. I really did. But I built this family on hard work, not on theft. If you are seeing this, it means you have failed the final test." The video paused, leaving the timer ticking down. Red numbers against a black background. Tick, tick, tick. I looked at my sons. They were no longer wolves. They were trapped rats. Daddy Megan started to cry, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. "We didn't mean it. It was just talk. Please turn it off. I don't want to go to jail." Brandon lunged at me, grabbing my lapels. His face was inches from mine. "Give me the password," he screamed, spitting saliva. "Give it to me now, or I swear to God." Mike O'Connor moved faster than a man his age should be able to. He grabbed Brandon by the back of his expensive suit jacket and threw him against the soundproof wall. Brandon crumpled to the floor, gasping for air. "Don't touch him," Mike said, his voice low and dangerous. I straightened my jacket. I looked down at my eldest son, the CEO, the success story, the thief. "You have 43 minutes, I said, checking my watch. "I suggest you start talking. And this time, no lies. Because as you can see," I pointed to the camera in the corner of the ceiling. The red recording light was blinking. "Mom is still watching." The silence in the hidden room was heavy enough to crush a man. My eldest son Brandon stood there, clutching the red notebook like it was a live grenade. The countdown timer on the wall ticked away silently, shaving seconds off their lives. 42 minutes. That was all the time they had left before their carefully constructed world of lies was emailed to the federal authorities. Brandon tried to close the notebook. He tried to act as if the leather cover burned his fingers. But Mike O'Connor stepped forward. The large contractor did not raise his voice. He simply tapped the head of his sledgehammer against the concrete floor. A metallic ring that said, "Read it. Read the first entry." Brandon. My voice was calm. It was the calmness of a judge who has already seen the evidence and is just waiting for the confession. Read the entry marked purely as asset reallocation. Let your brother and your wife hear how you built that new summer house in the Hamptons. Brandon swallowed hard. His throat clicked audibly. He opened the notebook again. His eyes darted across the page, trying to skip the damning numbers, trying to find a way to spin this. But numbers do not lie. Catherine had been an accountant before she was a CEO. She knew that math was the only language that could not be twisted. "It says here," Brandon started, his voice a dry rasp. "It says transaction number 7429. Date, August 14th. Transfer of $250,000 from the Employee Benevolence Fund to Blue Horizon Consulting Group." Keep reading, I said, leaning back against the cold steel of the filing cabinet. Tell us about Blue Horizon Consulting Group. Tell us where they are located. Brandon looked up at me. Sweat was beading on his forehead, ruining his spray tan. It is a vendor, Dad. Just a standard vendor for logistics. We use them for shipping routes. Liar. The word hung in the air. Blue Horizon. Consulting is not a logistics company, Brandon. It is a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. Mailbox number 404 in Georgetown. And the sole signatory on that account is not a vendor, it is you. Nicole gasped. She turned to look at her husband. You told me that money was a performance bonus, she hissed. You told me the board approved it. They did not approve it, I cut in. Catherine tracked every cent. Read the next line, Brandon. Read where the money came from. Because this is the part that killed your mother. This is the part that made her stop fighting the cancer. Brandon looked down at the page. His hands were shaking so badly, the paper rustled. Source of funds. The tone of his voice dropped. Source of funds. The Vestal Heavy Industries Pension Plan. Tier 1 employees. Tier 1 employees. I let those words sink in. Do you know who Tier 1 is, Justin? Do you know who that is, Megan? Those are the factory workers, the machinists, the people who worked for this family for 30 years. People like Mrs. Higgins, the receptionist who brings you coffee every morning. People like Old Man Miller, who lost 3 fingers working the press in the 90s. You didn't steal from a faceless bank, Brandon. You stole from their retirement. You stole their medicine money. You stole their heating bill money. It was just a loan, Brandon shouted suddenly, slamming the notebook shut. The sound echoed in the small room. We were going to pay it back. The market was down. I needed liquidity to cover the margin calls on the tech stocks. I was going to put it back with interest once the market corrected itself. It is not stealing if you intend to return it. It is creative accounting. It is leverage. Creative accounting. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Catherine found the transfer logs, Brandon. She found the structuring. Do you want to explain to your brother what structuring is, or should I? Brandon stayed silent, his jaw clenched tight. I turned to Justin, who was looking at his brother with a mix of horror and confusion. Structuring is when you break down a large theft into small transactions to avoid triggering the federal alarm system. Any transfer over $10,000 gets flagged by the IRS. So your brother, the genius CEO, set up an algorithm. He moved $9,500 every single day for 6 months. Drip by drip. He bled the pension fund dry. $1.2 million in total. And he moved it all to that account in the Caymans. That is a lie, Brandon screamed. His face was purple now. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You don't know what you are talking about. Mom didn't understand modern finance. She was confused. It was Gary. It was Gary, the CFO. He must have used my credentials. He has my passwords. I bet he set up that shell company to frame me. You are pinning this on the wrong man. I am the victim here. I am the one trying to save this company while you and Mom played house in this rotting mansion. I looked at Mike. Mike shook his head slowly, a look of pure disgust on his face. You are going to blame Gary, I asked softly. Gary, who has 5 kids. Gary, who drove your mother to chemo appointments when you were too busy playing golf. He is a snake, Brandon insisted, gaining confidence now that he had a scapegoat. I will fire him tomorrow. I will order a full audit. We will get to the bottom of this, Dad. You will see. I had nothing to do with it. This notebook is just circumstantial evidence. It is handwriting. It proves nothing. You have no digital footprint. I sighed. I reached out and touched the console on the desk next to me. The system was old, but Catherine had upgraded the audio drivers herself. You really don't get it, do you, son? Project Beekeeper wasn't just about reading your emails. Catherine knew you would blame Gary. She knew you would lie. She knew you would try to gaslight us even from beyond the grave. So she did what she always did. She verified. I pressed a small square button labeled File 1 Alpha. The speakers mounted in the corners of the room crackled with static for a brief second. Then the sound cleared. It was high-definition audio, crystal clear. The voice that filled the room was unmistakable. It was Brandon. But it wasn't the polished CEO voice he used in board meetings. It was slurred, arrogant, drunk. The recording began. Don't give me that ethics crap, Gary. The date stamp on the screen showed it was recorded late at night, 6 months ago. The sound of ice clinking in a glass. I don't care if it is the pension fund. It is my money. My last name is on the building. If those old geezers wanted a secure retirement, they should have worked harder. They should have been smart like me. Just make the transfer. Break it up into 4-digit chunks. Route it through the Panama server first, then to the Caymans. If the IRS asks, just categorize it under foreign consultation fees. There was a pause in the recording. Then Gary's voice, small and terrified. But Brandon, sir, Mrs. Higgins is retiring next month. If we drain the Tier 1 pot, her check will bounce. She won't be able to pay her mortgage. Then Brandon's voice again. Cruel, laughing. Let her eat cat food for all I care. I need that cash to cover the yacht deposit. If the deal falls through, I lose the slip at the marina. Just do it, Gary, or you are fired. And if you tell my father, I will bury you in legal fees so deep your grandchildren will be born bankrupt. Click. The recording ended. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't heavy. It was sharp. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Brandon stood frozen. His mouth hung open, but no sound came out. The defense of blaming the accountant had evaporated instantly. The creative accounting excuse was dead. We had all heard him. We had heard the malice. We had heard him choose a yacht deposit over the livelihood of a woman who had known him since he was in diapers. Mrs. Higgins used to give you lollipops when you came to the office, I said quietly. She knitted a blanket for your son when he was born. And you wanted her to eat cat food. Megan looked at her brother-in-law with visible revulsion. She took a step away from him as if his greed was contagious. Even Justin, who was no saint, looked sick. That was taken out of context, Brandon stammered. His voice was a whisper now. I was drunk. I was stressed. I didn't mean it. I put the money back. I swear I put it back. I shook my head. No, you didn't. Catherine checked the accounts the day she died. The balance was 0. The Cayman account, however, was empty too. You didn't invest it. You lost it. You gambled it away on high-risk options, hoping for a miracle. And when the miracle didn't come, you came for my house. You came for the last thing your mother had left. Brandon fell to his knees. It wasn't a gesture of repentance. It was the collapse of a man whose legs could no longer support the weight of his own sins. Dad, please. He sobbed, burying his face in his hands. I can fix this. Don't send that file. I will go to prison for 20 years. My life will be over. Your life as a thief is over, I corrected him. But we are not done yet. I turned my gaze to the filing cabinet, to the second drawer. Stand up, Brandon. Move aside. It is your brother's turn. Because while you were robbing the past, Justin was busy robbing the future. I looked at Justin. He was trying to hide behind his wife, but there was nowhere to hide in a room this small. Open the second drawer, Justin. Let's see how you managed to spend $50,000 on a vintage car that you never bought. Let's see whose signature is really on those loan documents. Justin trembled. He looked at the timer. 35 minutes. The clock was ticking, and there were still so many secrets left to rot in the light. The air in the room was thick with the smell of fear. Brandon was finished. He was a broken man on the floor, weeping into his hands, his arrogance stripped away to reveal the terrified child beneath. But the reckoning was only half over. I turned my gaze to my younger son. Justin was pressing his back against the wall as if he could melt into the soundproofing foam and disappear. He looked at his brother, then at me, then at the digital timer counting down the destruction of our family name. 35 minutes remained. Your turn, Justin. My voice was low, barely a whisper, but in that small acoustic chamber, it sounded like a gavel striking a block. Step over your brother. Step over the man you let take the lead while you hid in the shadows. It is time to open the second drawer. Justin shook his head rapidly. His face was pale, his lips trembling. No, Dad, please. I didn't steal from the pension fund. That was all Brandon. I don't know anything about shell companies. I am clean. I just made some bad investments. Investments. I tasted the word. It was bitter. Is that what we are calling them now? Step forward, Justin. Open the drawer. Or I will let the timer hit 0 and you can explain your investment strategy to the FBI agents who will come knocking at your door before sunrise. Justin moved like a man walking to the gallows. He stepped over Brandon's legs. He reached out a shaking hand and pulled open the second drawer of the heavy steel cabinet. Inside, there was no red notebook. There was a blue accordion folder. It was thick, stuffed with paper. Pull it out, I commanded. Read the label on the first document. Justin pulled out a sheet of paper. It was heavy stock, the kind banks use for official promissory notes. He squinted at it, sweat dripping from his nose onto the page. It is a loan agreement, he stammered, from the Nevada Skies Lending Group, and the amount I asked. $75,000, he whispered. And the collateral. He paused. He didn't want to say it. He looked at his wife Megan, who was chewing her fingernails in the corner, her designer makeup running down her cheeks. The collateral is the deed to the lake house. Our lake house. The house where I taught you to swim. The house where Catherine spent her last summer watching the sunsets. You put it up as collateral for a loan. But here is the interesting part, Justin. Look at the bottom of the page. Look at the signature. Justin stared at the signature. It was a bold, sweeping script with a distinctive loop on the letter D. It was a signature that had signed skyscrapers into existence. It was a signature that commanded respect in every bank in Chicago. It is your signature, Dad, he said, his voice barely audible. Yes, it is my signature. But I was not in Nevada on November 3rd. I was here, in a hospital room, holding your mother's hand while she underwent her third round of chemotherapy. So tell me, Justin, how did my signature get on a loan document in a strip mall lender's office 3,000 miles away? He didn't answer. He couldn't. Identity theft is a federal crime, Justin. But it is not just theft. It is a violation of the soul. You didn't just take my money. You took my name. You took the reputation I built over 50 years, and you signed it away to a loan shark. I didn't mean to hurt you, he cried out, the tears finally coming. It was crypto, Dad. Everyone said it was a sure thing. I was going to double the money in a month. I was going to pay off the loan and buy the deed back before you ever noticed. I just needed seed capital. The market crashed. It wasn't my fault. It was the market. Crypto, blockchain, Bitcoin. I spat the words out. You use these buzzwords like a shield. You think because it is digital, it isn't real. But Catherine dug deeper. She didn't just look at the bank statements. She hired a forensic digital analyst. I reached past him and pulled a second file from the drawer. It was a printout of geolocation data. You told us you were at a blockchain conference in Las Vegas. You told us you were networking with tech innovators. But this is the GPS tracking from your phone. You weren't at a conference center, Justin. You were at the Bellagio. You were practicing my signature while your mother was dying upstairs. You were perfecting the crime while eating the dinner she paid for. Justin covered his ears as if trying to block out the truth. Stop it. Please stop it. I won't stop. Because you didn't stop. You took out 3 more loans, $200,000 in total, all signed by me, all defaulted. The only reason the bank hasn't seized the lake house yet is because Catherine used her own savings to pay the interest payments anonymously. She was paying your debts while you were waiting for her to die so you could inherit the rest. I pressed the button for File 2 Bravo on the console. The screens flickered. This time, it wasn't a phone call. It was a video recorded from the hidden camera in the living room of your own house, Justin. On the screen, Justin and Megan were sitting on their white leather sofa. They were drinking expensive wine. The date stamp was 3 months ago. I can't believe the old man is still holding on to the accounts, Justin was saying on the screen. He is so selfish. Does he think he is going to live forever? And then the voice of Megan, the woman standing in the corner right now acting like a victim. Just sign the papers, Justin. Her voice on the recording was sharp, demanding. You said you could do it. Practice makes perfect. I need that deposit for the Aspen trip. And my friends are all carrying the new season Birkin bags. I look like a pauper carrying last year's collection. If you love me, you will get me that money. The video cut to Justin sighing, picking up a pen, and signing a document on the coffee table. I will do it, baby. For you. He loves you more than he loves his own father. The screen went black. In the small room, the betrayal hung in the air like smoke. Justin looked up at his wife. The look of love was gone, replaced by the desperate, clawing need for self-preservation. It was her fault, he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Megan. He scrambled backward on the floor, away from me toward the corner. She made me do it, Dad. You heard her. She pressured me. She said she would leave me if I didn't maintain the lifestyle. She said I was a loser if I couldn't provide. You coward, Megan hissed. Her face twisted into a mask of ugly rage. She stepped toward him, swinging her purse. You spineless little worm. You told me you had the money. You told me it was a bonus. You didn't tell me you were forging signatures. Don't you dare drag me into this. I did it for you, Justin wailed, looking at me with pleading eyes. Dad, look at her. Look at how much she spends. The bags, the shoes, the trips. I couldn't keep up. I just wanted to make her happy. I am a victim of emotional abuse, Dad. She manipulated me. I watched them, husband and wife, turning on each other like rats in a sinking ship. There was no loyalty here, no love, just greed and the desperate need to survive. Silence, I roared. They both froze. You are not a victim, Justin. You are a man of 38 years. You chose to pick up the pen. You chose to sit at that poker table. And you chose to blame your wife the moment you got caught. That is not just criminal, that is pathetic. I looked at the timer. 30 minutes. You forged my name to buy status, I said, my voice cold as the grave. You sold your father's integrity for a handbag and a seat at a poker table. And now, you want me to save you from the consequences. I walked over to the filing cabinet and pulled out one last document from Justin's folder. This, I said, holding it up, is a confession. Catherine drafted it before she passed. It states that you admit to identity theft and fraud. It states that you accept full responsibility for the debts and that you relinquish any claim to the family estate to pay back what you stole. Sign it. But that means I get nothing, Justin stammered. I will be destitute. Sign it, I repeated, or I let the clock run out. And when the FBI sees the forensic evidence of your forgery, you won't be destitute. You will be an inmate. And I don't think they allow Hermes bags in federal prison, Megan. Justin looked at the pen I threw onto the floor. He looked at his wife, who had turned her back on him. He looked at his brother, still sobbing. With a trembling hand, he reached for the pen. The sound of him signing his own name, his real name, scratched loudly in the silence. It was the sound of a life collapsing under the weight of its own lies. But the nightmare wasn't over. The timer was still ticking, and the biggest secret was yet to come. The sound of Justin's pen scratching against the paper ceased, leaving a silence that felt heavier than the concrete walls surrounding us. He huddled in the corner, a broken man who had just signed away his future to pay for his past sins. But the room still smelled of rot. We had cut out the tumors of theft and fraud, yet the cancer remained. I turned my back on my sons. I turned my attention to the woman standing by the door. Nicole. She was not crying. She was not trembling. She stood with her arms crossed over her chest, clutching her designer coat as if it were armor. Her chin was held high, projecting an air of aristocratic disdain. She looked at her husband Brandon on the floor, and her brother-in-law Justin in the corner, as if they were insects she had unfortunately stepped on. She thought she was safe. She thought that because her name was not Bennett by blood, because she hadn't signed the checks or forged the deeds, she was untouchable. She thought she was just the supportive wife dealing with a difficult in-law. You look at them with such disgust, Nicole. My voice was steady, cutting through the stale air. You look at them as if their failure is a personal insult to you, but they are just the hands. They are the blunt instruments. You, my dear daughter-in-law, you are the architect. Nicole let out a short, sharp laugh. It sounded like glass breaking. Don't be ridiculous, Douglas. This is a family matter between you and your sons. I have been nothing but patient with you. I have tried to find you the best care possible. I found Paradise Gardens for you. I did the research. I wanted you to be comfortable. Comfortable. I repeated the word. It hung in the air, dripping with irony. Is that what we are calling it now, comfort? I walked over to the filing cabinet. The third drawer was locked. It was the only one that required a key. I pulled a small brass key from my pocket. Catherine had given it to me the night before she died. She told me to use it only when I was ready to see the face of pure evil. I unlocked the drawer. Inside, there was no stack of papers. There was no thick folder. There was just a single small USB drive in a plastic evidence bag. And a medical report. You see, Nicole? Catherine didn't just track the money. She tracked the appointments. She noticed that you were having a lot of private lunches with Dr. Aris, a man who calls himself a geriatric specialist, but whom the medical board has investigated 3 times for overprescribing opioids. Nicole's face didn't move, but her knuckles turned white as she gripped her coat. Dr. Aris is a respected professional. He is the medical director of Paradise Gardens. I was consulting him about your declining cognitive health. My cognitive health is fine, Nicole. I solved the Sunday crossword puzzle in pen this morning. But you needed me to be sick. You needed me to be incompetent. Because as long as I am of sound mind, I control the estate. And as long as I control the estate, you can't sell the land to developers. I plugged the USB drive into the console. My sons stole my money, I said, looking her dead in the eye. They stole my reputation. But you, Nicole, you tried to steal my mind. You didn't want to wait for nature to take its course. You wanted to accelerate the process. I pressed play. The audio was high fidelity. It wasn't recorded in a house. The background noise was the clinking of silverware and the murmur of polite conversation. A restaurant. Le Jardin, specifically. I recognized the classical music in the background. A waiter's voice offered more wine. Then, Nicole's voice cut through the ambiance. Clear, precise, cold. I don't need a diagnosis, doctor. I need a solution. Then a male voice. Oily, hesitant. Dr. Aris. Mrs. Miller, as I explained, your father-in-law is physically robust for his age. His mental faculties seem intact. A court would never grant an involuntary conservatorship based on his current condition. Nicole's voice again. Impatient. Then change his condition. The room we were standing in seemed to drop 10 degrees. Brandon stopped crying. He lifted his head from the floor, looking at his wife with genuine confusion. Change his condition, Brandon whispered. What does that mean? Listen, I commanded. On the recording, Dr. Aris lowered his voice. There are pharmacological avenues, a combination of benzodiazepines and high-dose antipsychotics. Haloperidol, specifically. In an elderly patient, the side effects mimic advanced dementia, tremors, confusion, memory loss, slurred speech. And how long, Nicole asked. She sounded like she was ordering a steak. How long until he is declared incompetent? If we start the regimen immediately, 3 months. Maybe 2 if we up the dosage. But Mrs. Miller, the risks. This is essentially a chemical lobotomy. He won't ever recover. He will be a vegetable. I don't need him to recover, Nicole said. The sound of her sipping wine was audible. I need him pliable. I need him to sign the power of attorney over to Brandon, and then I need him to sit quietly in a corner at Paradise Gardens while we liquidate the assets. He is miserable anyway. He misses his wife. Think of it as a mercy. Mercy. The recording ended. The silence that followed was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of horror. It was the silence of looking into an abyss. Brandon scrambled to his feet. He looked at his wife as if she were a stranger, as if she were a monster wearing human skin. You told me it was a wellness plan, Brandon stammered. You told me the pills were vitamins. You told me they were for his heart. You were going to drug him. You were going to turn my father into a vegetable. Nicole didn't look at him. She looked at me. And for the first time, the mask slipped. The aristocratic veneer cracked, revealing the snarling wolf beneath. So what, she spat. Her voice was no longer smooth. It was shrill. Venomous. So what if I did? Look at you, Douglas. You are useless. You are a relic. You sit in this giant house gathering dust while we struggle. We are the future. You are the past. You should have died with Catherine. It would have been cleaner. She took a step toward me, her eyes blazing with hatred. You are selfish, she screamed. You hoard your wealth while your children drown. You deserve to be in that home. You deserve to drool in a cup. I was doing what needed to be done because your sons are too weak to pull the trigger. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my hand. I simply looked at her. I looked at her with the eyes of a man who had built skyscrapers that scraped the clouds. I looked at her with the eyes of a man who had loved a woman for 40 years and buried her with his own hands. I looked at her with a silence so profound, so terrifying, that it sucked the oxygen out of her lungs. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I just stared. And under that gaze, Nicole crumbled. The defiance drained out of her. She realized in that moment that she wasn't facing a confused old man. She was facing a patriarch, a lion who had just woken up. You call it mercy, I said finally. My voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. The law calls it conspiracy to commit grievous bodily harm. The law calls it elder abuse in the first degree. I picked up the medical report from the drawer. Dr. Aris was arrested this morning, Nicole. The FBI raided his office at Paradise Gardens an hour ago. He didn't have your resolve. He folded in 5 minutes. He gave them everything. The emails, the payment records, the prescription pads pre-signed with your instructions. Nicole staggered back. Her heel caught on the uneven floor and she stumbled, catching herself on the doorframe. No, she whispered. No, you are bluffing. Catherine knew, I said, walking slowly toward her. She knew you were the dangerous one. She knew the boys were just greedy. But you were malicious. That is why she left this for last. I pointed to the timer. 15 minutes. You are not going to prison for theft, Nicole. You are going to prison for attempted murder. And unlike the white-collar resort your husband might go to, they don't have tennis courts where you are going. Nicole looked at Brandon. Help me, she pleaded. Tell him. Tell him we did it together. Brandon stepped back. He looked at the woman he had married, the woman who had whispered poison in his ear for years, and he shook his head. I didn't know, he said, his voice breaking. I wanted the money. I wanted the house, but I didn't want to kill him. You are sick, Nicole. You are sick. The isolation was complete. The architect stood alone in the ruins of her design, and the clock was still ticking down to the final judgment. The air in the room had shifted from the chaos of accusation to a terrifying stillness. Brandon was on his knees, staring at the floor, where his arrogance had shattered. Justin was huddled in the corner, clutching the pen he used to sign away his future. Nicole stood by the wall, stripped of her pretenses, realizing she was not the hunter, but the prey. But the true architect of this moment was not in the room. She was on the screen, frozen in pixels, waiting to deliver the final stroke of her master plan. I walked over to the main console. My hand hovered over the keyboard. For a year, I had mourned Catherine as a wife. I had missed her warmth, her laugh, the way she smelled like vanilla and old paper. But standing there, looking at the complex array of servers and hard drives, I realized I had underestimated her. She wasn't just a wife. She was a general who had fortified the castle long before the siege began. I pressed the enter key. The large central monitor flickered. The static cleared, revealing Catherine again. She adjusted her glasses, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. She looked directly into the lens, her eyes sharp and clear, devoid of the pain that ravaged her body in those final months. Welcome to Phase 2, she said. Her voice filled the small concrete room, echoing off the steel walls. If you are watching this, it means Douglas has successfully verified the integrity of the first 2 files. It means the betrayal is not theoretical. It is confirmed. Brandon looked up at the screen. His eyes were red and swollen. Mom, he whispered. It was a plea to a ghost. Catherine continued, ignoring his tears. You always wondered why I called this project Beekeeper. You thought it was because of the apiary I kept in the garden. But you never paid attention to how a hive works. A hive protects the queen at all costs. But more importantly, a hive ruthlessly eliminates anything that threatens the colony's survival, even if that threat comes from within. On the screen, Catherine leaned forward. The camera zoomed in slightly. I knew my time was short. I knew the cancer was aggressive, but the cancer inside my body was nothing compared to the cancer growing in this family. I saw the greed in your eyes, Brandon, when you asked about my life insurance policy, before you asked about my prognosis. I heard the calculations in your voice, Justin, when you asked how long probate would take. And Nicole, I saw you measuring the windows for new curtains while I was still sleeping in the master bedroom. Nicole flinched as if she had been slapped. So I built this system, Catherine said. I hired Mike and his team to construct this room under the guise of structural repairs. I installed the servers myself, and I wrote the code. It is a simple program, really. It is called a dead man's switch, or in this case, a dead woman's switch. The image on the screen changed. It showed a diagram of a network, lines of data flowing from the house to a cloud server and then branching out to 3 distinct locations. The system is automated, Catherine explained. Every 24 hours, the system pings the local server. It requires a specific alphanumeric code to be entered manually on this console. If the code is entered, the system resets for another day. It sleeps. It waits. And if the code is not entered, Brandon asked, his voice trembling. If the code is not entered, Catherine answered as if she could hear him. Or if the wrong code is entered 3 times, the system assumes the worst. It assumes that I am gone, and that Douglas has been compromised. It assumes that you have finally succeeded in pushing him out, locking him up, or worse. The diagram on the screen turned red. Upon a failed check-in, the protocol executes immediately. It does not ask for permission. It does not hesitate. It takes every terabyte of data stored on these drives, the audio recordings of your conspiracy, the video evidence of your theft, the forensic accounting logs of the money laundering, and it pushes them to 3 pre-selected recipients. Recipient number 1. Catherine held up a finger. The Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division. They will receive the complete audit trail of the shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Recipient number 2. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, White Collar Crimes Unit. They will receive the evidence of identity theft, wire fraud, and the conspiracy to commit medical malpractice against a vulnerable adult. And recipient number 3, Catherine smiled. But it was a cold, dangerous smile. The board of directors of Bennett Global, along with every major shareholder and news outlet in the city. Panic erupted in the room. No, Brandon screamed, scrambling to his feet. You can't do that. The stock will tank. The company will be destroyed. My reputation. I will be ruined. Catherine's image remained calm. That is the point, Brandon. You cared more about the company than the family. So if you destroy the family, I will destroy the company. It is a fair trade. She pointed to the corner of the screen. Look at the clock. We all looked. The digital timer was relentless. The red numbers were counting down. 45 minutes. 44 minutes and 59 seconds. The system was activated the moment Mike broke down the wall, Catherine said. It sensed the breach. The countdown has begun. There is only one person who knows the code to stop it. There is only one person who can prevent your lives from being broadcast to the world. She looked at me through the screen. Douglas, my love, you are the keeper of the keys. You are the only one I trust. I have given you the power to judge them. If you feel they are redeemable, if you feel they have shown true remorse, you can enter the code and wipe the drives. You can give them a second chance. But she paused, and her expression softened into profound sadness. But if they are the wolves I fear they are, then you do nothing. You let the clock run out. You walk away, and you let the hive protect itself. The video ended. The screen went black, leaving only the red countdown timer glowing in the dim light. 44 minutes. The silence returned, but this time it was frantic. The realization hit them all at once. Their fate was not in the hands of lawyers or judges. It was in the hands of the father they had ridiculed, the father they had tried to medicate into oblivion, the father whose signature they had forged. Dad. Brandon gasped, rushing toward me. He stopped just short of grabbing my arm, remembering Mike's sledgehammer. Dad, you have the code. You have to enter it. Please. Think about the grandchildren. Think about the legacy. You can't let Mom destroy everything she built. She isn't destroying it, and I said, my voice steady. She is cleaning it. I turned to look at the timer. It was mesmerizing. Every second that ticked by was a heartbeat of justice. You want the code, I asked, looking at the 3 of them. You want me to save you? Yes, Nicole cried out, tears finally streaming down her face. Yes, Douglas, please. We are sorry. We are so sorry. We will do anything. We will sign whatever you want. Just stop that timer. I walked over to the chair where Catherine had sat to record that video. I sat down slowly, deliberately. I crossed my legs. I looked at my watch. Sorry is a cheap word, Nicole. Catherine didn't want apologies. She wanted change. And I don't see change here. I see fear. You are not sorry you did it. You are sorry you got caught. I pointed to the filing cabinet. There is more, I said. We are not done. The protocol isn't just about punishment. It is about revelation. You think the money and the fraud are the worst of it. But Catherine dug deeper. She found the rot at the very core. I looked at the timer again. 43 minutes. We have plenty of time, I said, settling into the chair. Before I decide whether to save you or let you burn, we need to talk about the night your mother died. We need to talk about why the nurse was dismissed an hour early. And we need to talk about why Brandon's phone records show a call to the funeral home 3 hours before she actually passed. Brandon's face went white. Whiter than the walls. You investigated that, he whispered. Catherine investigated that I corrected him. And now, we are all going to review the findings together. While the clock ticks, the red numbers on the wall kept counting down. 42 minutes. 41 minutes and 50 seconds. Time was no longer an abstract concept. It was a physical weight pressing against our chests. The air in the hidden room had become stale and hot, smelling of overheated servers and the sour stench of desperate people. My family was trapped in a box of their own making, and for the first time in their lives, they realized that money could not buy the air conditioning. Brandon was the first to break the silence. He wiped his face with a silk handkerchief that cost more than my first car. He looked at the timer, then at the camera, then at me. His eyes were darting back and forth like a rat looking for a hole in the trap. The tears were gone now, replaced by the frantic calculation of a businessman who realizes a hostile takeover is imminent. He stood up, smoothing his suit jacket, trying to regain some semblance of the CEO persona he had worn so arrogantly just an hour ago. Dad, let us be reasonable, Brandon said. His voice was shaking, but he forced a smile. It was a gruesome expression, like a skull trying to look friendly. We are emotional. We are all emotional right now. Mom just died. The grief is making us do crazy things, but we are businessmen, Douglas. You and me. We built this empire. We speak the same language. I sat in the chair, watching him. I didn't say a word. I just let him talk. I wanted to see how low he would go. Look at the big picture, Dad, Brandon continued, stepping closer but keeping a safe distance from Mike and his sledgehammer. You want justice? I get that. But what is justice really? Is justice destroying the stock price? Is justice putting your own flesh and blood in a federal prison where we will be killed in a week? Or is justice about restoration, about balance? He took a deep breath, preparing to play his ace card. I will cut you in, he said. The words hung in the air like pollution. I raised an eyebrow. You will cut me in, into my own money. I will give you 50%, Brandon said quickly, his words tumbling out over each other. Number 60%. We will restructure the ownership. I will fire the board. I will reinstate you as chairman emeritus with full veto power. We will sell the shell companies. We will liquidate the assets in the Caymans and bring the cash back. We can say it was a clerical error. We can say it was an unauthorized action by a rogue employee. We can fix this, Dad. You can have your house back. You can have the lake house. You can have everything. He paused, waiting for me to jump at the offer. He thought he knew me. He thought that because I was old, I was greedy for comfort. And in exchange, I asked softly, In exchange, you enter the password, Brandon said, pointing at the console. You wipe the drives. We walk out of here, we seal this room up, and we never talk about it again. We go back to being a family. A rich, powerful family. 60% dad. That is $50 million in liquid assets. You could buy an island. You could buy a new life. Why destroy us when you can own us? I looked at my son. I looked at the man Catherine and I had raised. We had given him piano lessons. We had sent him to the best schools. We had taught him to say please and thank you. And somewhere along the way, he had turned into a creature who thought a father's forgiveness could be bought for 60% of a stolen fortune. You offer me $50 million, I said, my voice flat. You offer me the money you stole from Mrs. Higgins. You offer me the money you stole from the pension fund. You are trying to bribe a judge with the evidence of your own crime. It is not a bribe, Brandon pleaded. It is a settlement. It is business. I stood up. The chair scraped against the concrete floor. Business, I repeated. You think this is business? When you planned to drug me into a vegetative state, was that a business decision? When you sold your mother's car for crypto gambling money, was that a transaction? I walked over to him. He flinched, expecting a blow. But I didn't hit him. I did something worse. I looked at him with pity. You are poor, Brandon. You are so incredibly poor. You have $50 million in an offshore account, but you don't have a single ounce of honor. You think I want the money. I don't want the money. I want the truth. And the truth is not for sale, not for 60%, not for 100%. Brandon's face crumbled. The deal was rejected. The negotiation had failed. He slumped back against the wall, defeated. But Nicole was not defeated. The architect was watching us. She saw that bribery had failed. She saw that emotional manipulation had failed. So she reached for the only weapon she had left, the weapon she used best, the law. She stepped forward, pushing Brandon aside. Her fear had crystallized into a cold, hard rage. She smoothed her coat and looked at me with the eyes of a shark. Fine, she spat. You don't want money. You want to be a martyr. But you are forgetting something, Douglas. You are forgetting where you are. She gestured around the room. This is illegal, she announced, her voice ringing with false confidence. This entire room, these cameras, these microphones. You are recording us without our consent. She turned to Justin, who was still cowering in the corner. Justin, you took that law class in college, didn't you? Tell him. Tell him about the two-party consent laws. Justin looked up, wiping his nose. Yeah, he mumbled. Yeah, in this state, it is a felony to record a private conversation unless all parties agree. We didn't agree to this. Nicole smiled. It was a triumphant, ugly smile. Exactly, she said. This is wiretapping, Douglas. This is invasion of privacy. You call this justice. I call it the fruit of the poisonous tree. Any lawyer worth his salt will get this evidence thrown out of court in 5 minutes. You can't use these recordings. And if you release them, we will sue you. We will sue you for every penny you have left. We will sue you for defamation. We will sue you for illegal surveillance. You will be the one going to jail, Douglas. Not us. She took a step closer to the console. So here is my counter-offer, she hissed. You delete those files right now. You wipe this server clean. And maybe, just maybe, we won't press charges against you for being a creepy old voyeur who spies on his own family. Brandon looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. She is right, Dad. It is inadmissible. You have nothing. I looked at Nicole. I had to admire her tenacity. Even with her head in the guillotine, she was trying to argue about the sharpness of the blade. I sighed and shook my head. You almost had me, Nicole. If this were a private home, if this were just a family dinner, you would be absolutely right. The law protects privacy. I walked back to the filing cabinet. I opened the bottom drawer. It was filled with thick binders. But you are forgetting one small detail, I said. You are forgetting who you are. And more importantly, you are forgetting where you are standing. I pulled out a binder. It was blue. On the cover it said Bennett Global, Human Resources. This house, I said, tapping the binder, isn't listed as a private residence on the deed. Catherine rezoned it 5 years ago. This estate is officially designated as a satellite office of Bennett Global Corporation. I opened the binder to page 42. And you, Nicole, you are not just my daughter-in-law. You are on the payroll. You are listed as a consultant for interior design. Brandon put you on the payroll so you could get health insurance and a company car. Remember. Nicole's face went pale. And you, Brandon, I continued flipping the pages. You are the CEO. And Justin, you are the Vice President of Special Projects. You are all employees. I held up a document. It was yellowed with age, but the signature at the bottom was fresh ink. When you signed your employment contracts, you signed the standard Bennett Global Security Agreement. Paragraph 7, Section B. I began to read aloud, my voice echoing in the silence. All employees acknowledge that Bennett Global premises are subject to 24-hour video and audio surveillance for security and quality assurance purposes. By accepting employment, the employee waives all expectations of privacy while on company property or using company resources. I lowered the binder. You signed it, Nicole. You signed it 3 years ago so you could get that company credit card you love so much. You consented to be recorded. You consented to be watched. You consented to every single second of this. I tossed the binder onto the floor at her feet. It landed with a heavy thud. This isn't wiretapping, I said coldly. This is quality assurance. And let me tell you, the quality of your loyalty is very, very poor. Nicole stared at the binder on the floor. Her legal threat had evaporated. Her shield was gone. She looked at the camera in the corner, realizing that she had signed her own warrant years ago out of greed for a company perk. There are no loopholes here, I said, my voice hardening. There is no escape. There is no deal. There is only the timer. I pointed to the wall. 38 minutes. The atmosphere in the room shifted again. The anger and the bargaining were gone. Now, there was only the suffocating weight of reality. They were trapped. Legally, physically, morally. Brandon started to hyperventilate. He loosened his tie, gasping for air. It is getting hot in here, he wheezed. I can't breathe. Dad, please. I have asthma. You are going to kill me. You are not going to die from asthma, Brandon, I said, sitting back down. You are having a panic attack. It is the natural reaction when the consequences of your actions finally catch up to you. Breathe through it. You will need your breath for what comes next. Because we are done with the money. We are done with the laws. Now we are going to talk about the blood. We are going to talk about the funeral. I looked at Mike. He nodded and handed me a new folder. This one was black. You asked for mercy, Nicole, I said, opening the black folder. You asked for a deal, but you never asked how your mother-in-law spent her final hours. You were too busy calling the funeral home to price-check caskets. The room went deathly silent. Even Brandon's wheezing stopped. Let's look at the phone records, I whispered. Let's see who was in a hurry to bury her before she was even cold. The black folder regarding the funeral home lay on the desk, a silent testament to their moral bankruptcy. But while the moral weight of their actions was crushing, it was abstract. Morality does not seize your bank account. Conscience does not repossess your car. My family, standing before me in their ruined designer clothes, had long ago inoculated themselves against shame. They could live with being bad people. What they could not live with, what terrified them more than death itself, was being poor. I closed the black folder. "We will come back to the funeral arrangements later," I said, my voice cutting through the thick, humid air of the room. "Because right now we need to address a misconception that is floating around this room. A misconception that gave you the confidence to stand here and negotiate." Brandon looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "What misconception?" he rasped. "We know we stole. We admitted it. We are trying to pay it back." I shook my head slowly. "That is the misconception, Brandon. You think you stole money. You think you took assets that belong to the company or to me, and that you can simply return them like a borrowed lawnmower and walk away." I swiveled the chair to face the wall of monitors. I typed a command into the console. The screens changed. The video of Catherine disappeared, replaced by a complex spiderweb of charts, red lines, and financial figures. It looked like a map of the nervous system, but instead of nerves, it was money. "You didn't steal," I said softly. "You borrowed." Justin frowned, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "What are you talking about?" "I forged the signature." "That is theft." "No, Justin," I corrected him. "When you forge a signature on a loan document, you create a debt. The bank gives you cash, but they hold a note, a promise to pay. And Brandon, when you drained the pension fund, you triggered a liquidity event. You created a liability." I stood up and walked to the large map on the screen. I traced a line from the Cayman Islands back to a small, nondescript box labeled the Beekeeper Trust. "Catherine knew you were greedy," I explained, "but she also knew you were lazy. She knew you wouldn't do your due diligence. You saw a pile of cash and you grabbed it. You never stopped to ask who was holding the other end of the rope." I turned to Brandon. "Let's talk about the Blue Horizon Consulting Group, the shell company you used to launder the pension money. You thought you were clever setting it up in the Caymans. You paid a local agent $5,000 to hide the paper trail. But did you ever check who owned the building that Blue Horizon rented its mailbox from?" Brandon stared at me blankly. It was a holding company. Caribbean Properties Limited." I nodded. "And who owns Caribbean Properties Limited?" He stayed silent. I pressed a button. The chart zoomed in. "Caribbean Properties Limited is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Beekeeper Trust," I said. "Catherine bought the building 3 years ago. She knew that if you were going to set up a scam, you would use the offshore route. She practically paved the road for you." "So what?" Brandon scoffed, trying to regain his footing. "So Mom owned the building where I rented a mailbox." "That doesn't mean anything." "It means everything," I snapped. "Because included in your rental agreement, the one you signed without reading because you were too busy planning which yacht to buy, was a clause regarding liability for illicit activities. Clause 14. The landlord reserves the right to assume all debts and liabilities incurred by the tenant if said tenant is found to be using the premises for illegal acts." I let that sink in. Catherine didn't just watch you steal, Brandon. She assumed the debt. When the pension fund was drained, the insurance company was going to come after you. They were going to seize the company assets. Catherine stopped them. She used her own private funds, money she inherited from her grandmother, money that was never part of the Bennett estate, and she bought the debt. Brandon's mouth fell open. She paid it off. No, I said, my voice hard as iron. She bought the note. She bought the right to collect. You don't owe the pension fund anymore. You owe the Beekeeper Trust. And do you know what the interest rate is on a defaulted fraudulent liability under Cayman law? I pointed to a number on the screen. It was flashing red. 29%. Compounded daily. Retroactive to the date of the first transaction. Brandon did the math in his head. I could see the color drain from his face until he looked like a corpse. $1.2 million, he whispered. Plus interest. That is almost $2 million. $2.4 million as of this morning, I corrected him. And it is not corporate debt, Brandon. It is personal. Because you signed the lease as the guarantor. You, not the company. You. I turned to Justin. He was trying to make himself small in the corner, hoping the hurricane would miss him. And you, Justin. Nevada Skies Lending Group. The sharks who gave you the cash for your crypto gambling. You thought they were mobsters. You were terrified they would break your legs. I walked over to the console and pulled up a document. It was the Articles of Incorporation for Nevada Skies. Catherine hated violence, I said, but she loved leverage. Nevada Skies is a venture capital firm specializing in high-risk distressed assets. The primary investor is, you guessed it, the Beekeeper Trust. Justin slid down the wall until he hit the floor. No, he whimpered. No way. Catherine bought your bad loans, Justin. Every time you defaulted, the bank sold the debt to a collection agency. Catherine bought the collection agency. She owns every single promissory note you signed. She owns the deed to the lake house. She owns the lien on your car. She even owns the debt on your credit cards which you stopped paying 6 months ago. I stood in the center of the room, looking at my sons. They were no longer just thieves. They were indentured servants. You thought you were stealing from a dying woman, I said, my voice filled with a mixture of anger and awe at my late wife's brilliance. But you were actually signing your life away to her ghost. You don't owe the banks. You don't owe the government. You owe us. You owe the trust. And here is the trap, I said, delivering the final blow. I picked up a thick legal document from the desk. The Beekeeper Trust is an irrevocable dynasty trust. It is designed to exist in perpetuity, and it has a very specific clause regarding debtors. I read from the document. In the event that a beneficiary of the Bennett estate is also a debtor to the trust, their inheritance shall be withheld until the debt is satisfied in full. Furthermore, if the debt exceeds the value of the inheritance, the debtor shall be personally liable for the remainder. This liability is not dischargeable in bankruptcy. I looked at Nicole. She was the one who understood money best. She was the one who realized what I had just said. Not dischargeable, she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. That is right, Nicole. Catherine categorized these loans as fraud-based liabilities. Under federal bankruptcy code, debts incurred through fraud cannot be wiped away. You can file for Chapter 7. You can file for Chapter 11. It doesn't matter. The debt stays. It sticks to you like tar. I looked at Brandon. You have $50 million in assets, you said. I laughed. You have nothing. The moment this timer hits 0, the trust executes a lien on everything you own. Your house, your cars, your stock options, your 401k, even that watch on your wrist. It all belongs to the trust now. Brandon looked at his Rolex. He frantically tried to unclasp it, as if getting rid of it would stop the nightmare. And you, Nicole, I continued. You signed a prenuptial agreement that protected you from Brandon's debts, didn't you? You thought you were smart. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes. Yes, I did. I am protected. I shook my head. Not for this. Because you are listed as an officer of Blue Horizon Consulting. Remember, Brandon made you the secretary so you could claim a salary. That makes you jointly and severally liable. The meaning of those legal words hit her like a physical blow. Jointly and severally. It meant that if Brandon couldn't pay, they would come for her. They would come for her family money. They would come for her jewelry. They would come for everything she had brought into the marriage. "You are ruined," I said simply. "You are not just going to prison. You are going to go to prison as paupers. And when you get out, in 10 or 15 years, you will still owe the money. The interest will have been running the whole time. You will work for the rest of your lives, flipping burgers or digging ditches, and every single paycheck will be garnished by the trust." I looked at Justin. "And you, Justin, you have children, 2 beautiful twins. Don't bring them into this," he begged. "Please, Dad." "Not the kids." "I didn't bring them into this," I said. "You did. When you signed that cross-collateralization agreement for the second loan. You pledged all future assets and beneficiary interests." I paused, letting the horror sink in. "That includes your children's college funds. That includes any trust fund set up for them. The trust absorbs it all to pay your gambling debts. You haven't just bankrupted yourself. You have bankrupted your children. They will start their lives with nothing because their father couldn't walk away from a poker table." The room was silent, except for the hum of the servers and the weeping of my family. They were stripped bare. The arrogance was gone. The threats were gone. All that was left was the cold, hard math of their destruction. "Catherine didn't want this," I said quietly. "She wanted you to be successful. She wanted you to be independent. But she knew that if you turned on us, if you tried to eat the hand that fed you, she had to make sure that you choked on it." I checked the timer. 35 minutes. "You have a choice," I said. "It is a slim choice, but it is a choice." They looked up. Hope is a cruel thing, but it was all they had. "You can let the timer run out," I said. "The files go to the FBI. The liens are executed instantly. You go to prison and you lose everything, or what?" Brandon asked. His voice was a husk. "Or you sign a confession," I said. "A full, public confession. You admit to the fraud. You admit to the abuse. You resign from the company immediately. You waive your rights to the inheritance, and you agree to a payment plan managed by the trust." "A payment plan?" Nicole asked. "You will work," I said. "Real work, not sitting in a boardroom, not lunching with doctors. You will work for the foundation Catherine set up. You will build houses for the homeless. You will serve food in the soup kitchens. You will earn minimum wage, and the rest of your salary will go to paying back the debt." Brandon stared at me. "You want us to be laborers?" "I want you to be honest," I said. "For the first time in your lives." "But the debt," Justin said. "It is millions. We can never pay it back on minimum wage." "No," I agreed. "You can't. You will be in debt until the day you die. You will live in small apartments. You will drive used cars. You will clip coupons. You will live the life of the people you stole from. You will live the life of Mrs. Higgins." I looked at the timer. "But you will be free. You won't go to prison. You will be able to tuck your children into bed at night. You will be able to see the sun rise without looking through bars." I leaned forward. "It is a high price, but it is the only deal on the table. The beekeeper doesn't negotiate with wolves. It just decides whether to sting or to swarm." Nicole looked at her hands, her manicured nails, her diamond rings. She looked at Brandon, the man she thought was her golden ticket, now just a debtor with a heavy balance. She looked at the camera, knowing her mother-in-law had outplayed her from the grave. "We will be slaves," she whispered. "No," I said. "You will be citizens. Welcome to the real world, Nicole. It is expensive here." Brandon looked at the confession documents I had placed on the table. He looked at the pen. It was a cheap ballpoint pen, the kind you buy in a pack of 10, not the gold fountain pens he was used to. "If I sign," he asked, his voice trembling. "If I sign, will you turn off the timer?" I looked at the red numbers. 32 minutes. If you sign and if you mean it, I will enter the code. The emails won't be sent. The FBI won't come today, but the debt remains. The trust is always watching. Miss one payment, skip one day of work, and the deal is void. The evidence goes public. I stood up and backed away from the table. The pen is right there. It is the most expensive signature you will ever make, but it is the only one that can buy your freedom. I waited. The sound of the cooling fans was the only noise in the grave of their ambitions. Who would be the first to break? Who would be the first to accept that the party was over and the bill had finally come due? Brandon reached for the pen. His hand shook violently. He looked at me one last time, searching for a hint of the father who used to catch him when he fell off his bike. But that father was gone. In his place was the executor, and the executor demanded payment. I will sign, Brandon whispered. And with that, the first domino of their total surrender began to fall. But as his pen touched the paper, a loud banging sound echoed from the heavy steel door of the safe room. We all froze. Mike O'Connor gripped his sledgehammer tighter. Someone was outside, and they were trying to get in. The banging on the steel door stopped as abruptly as it had begun. Silence rushed back into the room, filling the vacuum left by the noise. But the damage was done. The sudden sound had shattered the fragile trance of the negotiation. Brandon was holding the pen, the tip hovering millimeters above the confession paper. But he wasn't writing. He was trembling. And then, the trembling stopped. It was replaced by a rigidity that I recognized instantly. It was the stiffness of a cornered animal deciding to bite. He looked at the pen in his hand. It was a cheap plastic stick, a symbol of his new life as a laborer, a symbol of his humiliation. He looked at Nicole, who was weeping silently. He looked at Justin, who was practically catatonic in the corner. And then he looked at me. His eyes had changed. The panic was gone. The pleading was gone. In their place was something vast and empty. It was a void where a soul used to be. I am not signing this, Brandon said. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried a terrifying weight. I stayed seated. You have no choice, son. The timer is at 30 minutes. I do have a choice, he said. He dropped the pen. It clattered on the concrete floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. I have the choice to end this, to reset the board. He reached into the back of his waistband. Mike O'Connor shouted a warning. Gun. But it was too late. Brandon pulled out a firearm. It wasn't a hunting rifle. It was a sleek, compact pistol. A Sig Sauer P365. The kind of gun executives buy for protection and keep in their glove compartments, hoping they never have to use it. Now, my son was pointing it at the only man in the room who could save him. Mike moved instantly. He didn't hesitate. He didn't think. He reacted with the muscle memory of a man who had cleared rooms in Fallujah. He lunged toward Brandon, covering the 10 feet between them in a heartbeat. But Justin moved too. Driven by a sudden, desperate loyalty to his brother, or perhaps just the sheer chaos of the moment, Justin threw himself at Mike. He wasn't a fighter. He was soft. But he was heavy, and his momentum was enough to knock Mike off balance. "Get off me!" Mike roared. The struggle was short, brutal, and ugly. It wasn't a movie fight. There was no choreography. It was the raw violence of survival. Mike drove an elbow back into Justin's ribs. I heard the sickening crunch of bone. Justin screamed, a high-pitched sound that didn't belong in a man's throat. He collapsed, clutching his side, gasping for air. Mike spun around, ready to disarm Brandon. He was fast. He was lethal. But he wasn't fast enough to beat the geometry of the room. Brandon had backed into the corner behind the desk. He had the high ground, and he had the gun leveled directly at my chest. "Stay back," he screamed. His voice cracked, spraying spit. "Stay back, or I swear to God I will put a hole in him." Mike froze. He stood over Justin's writhing body, his hands raised slowly. He looked at me, his eyes apologizing for the failure. I gave him a tiny nod. It wasn't his fault. You can train for war, but you can't train for the insanity of a son who wants to kill his father. I looked at Brandon. The barrel of the gun was shaking. But at this range, barely 6 feet, it didn't matter. A twitch of his finger would end 72 years of life. "Put it down, Brandon," I said. My voice was calm. It was the calmness of a man who has accepted that the story might end here. "You don't want to do this. Fraud is one thing. Patricide is a door you can never come back from." "I don't want to," Brandon yelled. Tears were streaming down his face again, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of rage. "You made me do this. You pushed me. You cornered me. You and that dead witch in the computer. You think you are gods. You think you can judge me." "You judged yourself," I said softly. "Shut up," he shrieked. He waved the gun wildly, momentarily pointing it at Nicole before snapping it back to me. "Shut up. I am the CEO. I am the head of this family. I am not a laborer. I am not a criminal. I am a Bennett." "You are a boy with a gun," I said, "and you are shaking." I looked at the weapon. I remembered when he bought it. He had shown it to me at Christmas 2 years ago. He said it was for home defense. He said he wanted to keep his family safe. And now, he was using it to destroy the only family he had left. The irony was suffocating. My heart didn't race. My palms didn't sweat. Instead, time seemed to slow down. I looked at my son, and the image of the man in the expensive suit flickered and faded. In my mind, I saw him as a toddler. I saw him taking his first steps on the lawn of this very house. I remembered the way he used to cling to my leg when strangers came over. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike, running behind him, holding the seat, promising him I wouldn't let go. I promised I wouldn't let go. But I had let go. Somewhere between the piano lessons and the boarding school, somewhere between the first dividend check and the first sports car, I had let go. I had let the world turn him into this. Was it my fault? The question burned in my mind hotter than the fear of the bullet. Did I work too much? Did I give him too much? Did I shield him from the consequences of his actions so often that he began to believe he was immune to reality? I looked at his face. It was twisted into a mask of hatred. But beneath the hate, I saw the terror. He was a child who had broken a vase and was terrified of the punishment. Only now, the vase was his life, and the only way to avoid the punishment was to kill the parent. "Brandon," I said, keeping my voice low and hypnotic, "look at me. Not at the timer. Not at the gun. Look at your father." He blinked, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "I remember when you were 7, I said. You found a baby bird that had fallen out of the nest. You cried for hours. You made me climb the tree to put it back. You were so gentle, Brandon. You had such a good heart." "Stop it," he sobbed. "Don't do that. Don't use memories against me. I am not using them against you. I am trying to find you. I am trying to find the man who wouldn't hurt a bird, inside the man who wants to shoot his father." "He isn't here anymore," Brandon screamed. "You killed him, you and Mom. You killed him with your expectations. You killed him with your shadows. I could never be good enough for you. I could never build a skyscraper. I could never build an empire. I was just the son. The disappointment." "You were never a disappointment," I said. "You were my son. That was enough." Liar, he shouted. He took a step forward. The gun was inches from my face now. I could see the rifling inside the barrel. I could smell the gun oil. Enter the password, he commanded. Enter it now, or I will kill you, and I will enter every combination until I find it. I have nothing to lose. You have your soul to lose, I said. I don't have a soul, he spat. I sold it. Remember, you just told me. I sold it for a yacht, so save me the sermon. Type the code. I looked at Mike. He was tense, ready to spring, but he knew the distance was too great. If he moved, Brandon would fire reflexively. I looked at Justin, still moaning on the floor. I looked at Nicole, who was staring at her husband with a look of pure, unadulterated horror. She had wanted money. She had wanted power. She hadn't signed up for blood. Brandon, I said slowly, if you pull that trigger, the timer doesn't stop. The dead man's switch is linked to my heart rate monitor watch. I raised my left wrist. Catherine thought of everything. If my heart stops, the message sends instantly. You don't get 45 minutes. You get 0 seconds. You kill me, you release the evidence. You ensure your own destruction. Brandon stared at the watch. His eyes widened. He hadn't noticed it. You are lying, he whispered. Am I? Do you want to gamble your life on it? You have lost every gamble you ever made, Brandon. Do you really want to double down on this one? His hand wavered. The gun lowered a fraction of an inch. The logic was penetrating his madness. He was trapped. If he let me live, he was a slave to the debt. If he killed me, he was a prisoner exposed to the world. He let out a scream of frustration. It was a primal, animalistic sound. He turned away from me and swung the gun toward the wall of monitors. I hate you, he screamed. I hate you all. He fired. The sound was deafening in the small concrete room. Bang! One of the monitors exploded in a shower of sparks and glass. Bang! Bang! He fired again and again, destroying the screens, destroying the image of the timer, destroying the digital eyes that had watched his sins. Mike lunged. This time there was no hesitation. Mike hit Brandon like a freight train. He tackled him into the console. The gun went flying, skittering across the floor and stopping at my feet. Brandon didn't fight back. He collapsed instantly, all the fight draining out of him as soon as the gun left his hand. He lay on the floor, pinned under Mike's weight, sobbing uncontrollably. It wasn't the crying of a man. It was the crying of a child who has realized he is lost in the dark and no one is coming to find him. Mike twisted Brandon's arm behind his back and looked up at me. He was breathing hard, a trickle of blood running down his forehead where he had hit the corner of the desk. Are you okay, sir? Mike asked. I looked down at the gun at my feet. I looked at my son pinned to the ground like a criminal. I looked at the shattered screens sparking and smoking. I am alive, Mike, I said, but I am not okay. I bent down and picked up the gun. It was heavy. Warm. I popped the magazine out and ejected the round from the chamber. I placed the disassembled weapon on the desk. I looked at the one monitor that was still working. It was the one displaying the countdown. The bullets had missed it. 25 minutes. Brandon, I said, my voice hollow. Get up. Mike let him go. Brandon scrambled backward until he hit the wall. He curled into a ball, pulling his knees to his chest. You tried to kill me, I said. You actually tried. I didn't mean to, he sobbed. I wanted it to stop. It stops now, I said. I turned to the console. The keyboard was undamaged. I am going to enter the code, I said. They all looked up. Even Justin stopped moaning. You are going to save us, Nicole asked, disbelief washing over her face. After he pulled a gun on you, I am not saving you, I said. I am saving myself. I am saving myself from the burden of being your father. I typed in the password. It was 8 characters long. CATHERINE. The name of the woman we all failed. The timer stopped. The red numbers froze at 24 minutes and 10 seconds. The screen flashed green. System disarmed. Upload canceled. The relief in the room was palpable. It was physical. Nicole slumped against the wall. Justin let his head fall back to the floor. Brandon closed his eyes. But I wasn't done. I didn't send the files to the FBI, I said, because Catherine wouldn't want her final act to be putting her son in a cage. She loved you too much for that, even though you didn't deserve it. I walked over to the door. Mike opened it. The cool air of the basement hallway rushed in. But the deal has changed, I said. There is no payment plan. There is no working off the debt. I looked at Brandon. You are fired, effective immediately. You are removed from the board. You are stripped of all titles. I looked at Justin. You are evicted. You have 24 hours to vacate the lake house. The locks will be changed tomorrow at noon. I looked at Nicole. And you. The prenup stands. But I am filing a civil suit for the return of all company assets you misappropriated. You will leave this marriage with nothing but the clothes on your back. But the debt, Brandon whispered. The millions. I looked at him with cold, dead eyes. The debt remains. The trust still holds the note. But I am not going to garnish your wages. I am going to sell the debt. Sell it, Brandon asked. To who? To a collection agency, I said. A real one. One that doesn't care that your last name is Bennett. One that will pursue you to the ends of the earth. You will spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. You will never own a home. You will never get a loan. You will be financial ghosts. I stepped out of the room. Get out of my house, I said. Don't take anything. Just go. I walked down the hallway, leaving them in the ruins of their greed. I didn't look back. I climbed the stairs to the main floor of the mansion. The rain had stopped. The sun was trying to break through the clouds. I walked out the front door and stood on the porch. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of wet grass and earth. It smelled clean. I took out my phone. I saw the live stream notification. I had told them I was streaming to the board. I wasn't. I had lied. But I had recorded everything. I pressed the save button. The file was named Justice. I walked to my car. I was 72 years old. I was alone. My wife was dead. My sons were strangers. But as I started the engine, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt light. The heavy lifting was done. The foundation had been repaired. It wasn't the house I expected to build, but it was strong. And it was mine. The heavy steel door was open. The path to the hallway was clear. My sons and their wives were stumbling toward it like shipwreck survivors seeing dry land. They were broken. They were bankrupt. And they were destined for a life of poverty. But they were breathing. They thought they had escaped the ultimate penalty. They thought that because I had typed the password and stopped the automatic data dump, the walls of this room would keep their darkest secrets. They thought the gun Brandon had pulled, the moment of madness where a son tried to kill his father, was just a memory shared between us, something they could repress and deny in therapy sessions years from now. They were wrong. "Wait," I called out. My voice was not loud, but it stopped them in their tracks. It hooked them by the spine and pulled them back. Brandon stopped with his hand on the doorframe. He didn't turn around. He just froze, his shoulders hunching as if anticipating a physical blow. "What is it, Dad?" he whispered. "We are leaving. We accepted the terms. We are going." "You are forgetting something," I said. I picked up my phone from the console. The screen was bright in the dim room. I tapped the screen once and turned the volume up. A voice came from the phone speaker. It was a deep baritone voice, a voice Brandon knew very well. It was the voice of Marcus Vance, the chairman of the board of directors of Bennett Global. "Douglas, are you safe?" The color drained from Brandon's neck. He turned around slowly. His eyes were wide, staring at the phone in my hand as if it were a bomb. Who is that?" Brandon stammered. I didn't answer him. I spoke into the phone. "I am safe, Marcus. The situation is contained. The weapon has been secured." Weapon. The word hung in the air. Nicole covered her mouth with her hand to stifle a scream. Justin grabbed the wall for support. I walked toward them, holding the phone out so they could see the screen. It wasn't a recording. It was a video call. A live video conference with a grid of 6 faces. "I lied to you," I said calmly. "I told you the dead man's switch would email the board if the timer ran out. That was true. But I didn't tell you about the crisis management protocol." I pointed to a small, unassuming lens embedded in the smoke detector above the door. It was the only camera Brandon hadn't smashed, because he didn't know it was there. "Catherine didn't trust machines completely," I explained. "She trusted people. Specifically, she trusted the people who helped build this company." When Mike broke down the wall, this camera went live. It didn't broadcast to the public. It broadcast directly to the private servers of the Board of Directors Executive Committee. I looked at the phone screen. "Gentlemen, you saw everything." From the phone speaker, Marcus Vance's voice filled the room, cold and final. "We saw it, Douglas. We saw the confession. We heard the details of the pension fund embezzlement. And Brandon flinched at the sound of his name. "We saw the gun," Marcus said. His voice trembled with suppressed rage. "We saw you point a loaded weapon at your father. We saw you pull the trigger. We saw the muzzle flash." "No," Brandon gasped. "No. It was a mistake. I didn't mean to. I was panicked. Marcus, please. You know me. I have made you millions. You are a monster," Marcus cut him off. "You are not a CEO. You are a rabid dog. The board has already voted. The motion passed unanimously 2 minutes ago. You are removed. You are banned from the premises. And your stock options are forfeited under the morality clause." But it wasn't just the board. I swiped the screen to the left. Another face appeared. A man in a uniform. "Chief Miller," I said. "Did you get all that?" Chief Miller, the head of the local police department and a man I had played poker with for 20 years, nodded on the screen. "We got it, Doug. We have the audio and the visual. It is the cleanest evidence package I have ever seen. Attempted murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, conspiracy to commit fraud." Brandon looked at the camera lens in the smoke detector. He realized now that the red light wasn't just a sensor. It was an eye. A sleepless, unblinking eye that had broadcast his destruction in high definition. He realized that while he was negotiating for 60%, while he was crying about asthma, while he was screaming about hating me, hundreds of people were watching. The board members, the lawyers, the police, they had seen him stripped bare. They had seen him not as a powerful executive, but as a weak, violent coward. The image of him holding that gun, his face twisted in hate, was now burned into the servers of the police department. There was no spinning this. There was no PR firm in the world that could fix this. I thought we had a deal," Brandon whispered. His legs gave out. He didn't fall dramatically. He just sank, sliding down the doorframe until he was sitting on the dirty floor. You typed the password. You disarmed the system. I disarmed the email blast, I said, standing over him. I stopped the scandal from hitting the newspapers this morning. I spared the company the public embarrassment. But I never said I would spare you from the law. You let me think I was free, he cried. You let me think I just had to pay a debt. I gave you a moment of hope, I said, because I wanted you to feel what it is like to lose it. I wanted you to feel what Mrs. Higgins felt when you stole her pension. I wanted you to feel what your mother felt when she realized her sons were vultures. Brandon looked at his hands, the hands that had held the gun. They were shaking so bad he couldn't clasp them together. Everyone saw, he mumbled. Everyone. Everyone who matters, I confirmed. Nicole fell to her knees beside him, grabbing his lapels. You idiot, she screamed, shaking him. You absolute idiot. You pulled a gun. I told you not to. I told you we were being watched. Now we go to jail. We go to real jail. For years. She turned to me, her face a mask of desperate, ugly self-preservation. Douglas, I didn't touch the gun. You saw. The video saw. I tried to stop him. I am a witness. I can testify against him. Please. I will tell them everything. Just don't let them take me. I looked at her with disgust. Even at the end, she was willing to sell her husband to save her own skin. The chief saw your role too, Nicole, I said. He heard the recording about Dr. Aris. Conspiracy to commit bodily harm is a felony. You are not a witness. You are a co-conspirator. Sirens. We could hear them now. Not the distant wail from earlier. These were close, loud, screaming up the driveway. The blue and red lights began to flash against the basement windows, painting the room in the colors of judgment. Brandon looked up. He looked at the gun sitting on the desk where I had left it. For a second, I saw a flash of something dark in his eyes, a desire to end it, to grab the weapon and finish the job, either on me or himself. But Mike stepped in front of the desk. He crossed his arms. Don't even think about it, son, Mike said. Brandon put his head between his knees and let out a sound that wasn't human. It was the sound of a life ending. Not with a bang, but with a live stream. The heavy boots of the SWAT team hit the floorboards upstairs. They are here, I said. I looked at the camera in the smoke detector one last time. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Chief. We are done here. I hung up the phone. The door burst open. The door to the basement didn't just open. It was breached with a force that shook the foundation of the house. A battering ram hit the heavy steel lock, and the door swung inward with a deafening crash that signaled the end of my family's reign. Before the dust could settle, the room was flooded with blinding white tactical lights. The beams cut through the gloom, dissecting the shadows where my sons were hiding. The air was instantly filled with the chaotic, rhythmic shouting of a SWAT team. Police! Get down! Get on the ground! Hands where I can see them. It was a symphony of command. There was no room for negotiation. There was no space for a clever retort or a bribe. This was raw, state-sanctioned force. 6 officers in full tactical gear poured into the small room. Their boots were heavy on the concrete. Their weapons were raised, pointing not at criminals in an alley, but at men in $3,000 suits cowering in the corner of a mansion. Brandon was the first to go down. An officer grabbed him by the shoulder of his jacket and spun him around. He didn't resist. He was limp, like a marionette whose strings had been cut. I watched as they pushed him face first against the wall. His cheek was pressed against the cold concrete, the same wall that hid the cameras that had captured his downfall. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just let out a low, pathetic moan as his arms were wrenched behind his back. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was sharp and final. Click, click, click. That sound was louder than any gunshot. It was the sound of a door locking that wouldn't open again for 20 years. Justin was next. He was still curled on the floor, clutching his broken rib. 2 officers hauled him up. He screamed in pain, his legs dragging uselessly beneath him. "My rib," he wailed. "You are hurting me. I need a doctor." "You need a lawyer, son," one of the officers said, showing zero sympathy. They cuffed him while he was still half slumped on the floor. The metal bit into his wrists. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a childish terror. "Dad," he pleaded, tell them I am hurt." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had forged my signature to pay for poker chips. "You have the right to remain silent, Justin," I said calmly. "I suggest you use it." Then Chief Miller walked in. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. He was wearing his dress uniform. He stepped over the debris of the shattered monitors and stood in the center of the room. He looked at me and nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the tragedy that had just played out. Then he pulled a folded document from his pocket. He looked at Brandon, who was now being held up by 2 officers. Brandon Bennett, the chief, read, his voice filling the room with the authority of the law. "You are under arrest." Brandon looked up, sweat and tears mixing on his face. "On what grounds?" he whispered. The chief unfolded the paper. It was a long list. Count 1. Attempted murder in the 1st degree. We have video evidence of you discharging a firearm with intent to kill Douglas Bennett. Count 2. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Count 3. Grand larceny. Count 4. Wire fraud. Count 5. Racketeering and conspiracy to commit money laundering. The chief paused, looking at the cowering man. And count 6. Elder abuse. Brandon closed his eyes. The weight of the words crushed him. Each count was a nail in his coffin. There was no way out. No bail bondsman could fix this. No high-priced attorney could spin a video of an attempted execution. But the drama wasn't over. The officers turned to the women. Nicole tried to back away. She pressed herself into the corner, holding her hands up as if to ward off a physical blow. "Don't touch me," she shrieked as a female officer approached her. "Do not touch me. I am Nicole Miller Bennett. My father is a judge in Connecticut. You have no right. I am a victim here. My husband is crazy. He pulled the gun. I was a hostage." The officer didn't pause. She grabbed Nicole's wrist and twisted it behind her back with practiced efficiency. Nicole Miller Bennett, the chief, continued, reading from the 2nd page of the warrant. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit grievous bodily harm. We have the recordings from Dr. Aris. We have the payments from your personal account to his clinic." "That is a lie," Nicole screamed, thrashing against the officer's grip. Her perfect hair was falling into her face. Her coat was twisted. She looked feral. "I was just asking for medical advice. I am a concerned wife. Douglas, tell them. Tell them I was just trying to help you." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had ordered a chemical lobotomy for me over a glass of Chardonnay. "You helped me realize the truth, Nicole," I said. "That is the only help you ever gave me." "Take her away," the chief ordered. As they dragged her toward the door, Nicole's facade shattered completely. She turned her head, spitting venom at her husband. "This is your fault, Brandon," she screamed. "You weak, pathetic man. You couldn't even kill him right. You ruined my life. I hope you rot. I hope you die in there." Megan was different. When the officers approached her, she didn't fight. She collapsed. She fell to her knees, sobbing hysterically. "I have kids," she wailed. "Please, I have twins. Who will pick them up from school? They need their mother." "You should have thought about that before you helped your husband steal their college funds," the chief said coldly. Megan pointed a shaking finger at Justin, who was being dragged out ahead of her. "He made me do it," she sobbed to the officers. "He is a gambler. He is abusive. I was scared. I didn't know about the forgeries. I thought the money was legal. I am innocent. Please. I will testify against him. Just let me go home to my babies." Justin looked back at his wife. The betrayal in his eyes was absolute. "You spent the money, Megan," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You bought the bags. You booked the trips. Don't you lie. You were the one who told me to practice the signature." "Shut up," Megan screamed back. "Shut up, you loser." I watched them. I stood in the center of the storm, untouched. I watched my family, the dynasty I had thought I was building, tear itself apart. They were like rats in a bucket, climbing over each other to escape the rising water. There was no loyalty. There was no love. There was only the desperate, ugly instinct of self-preservation. "Get them out of here," I said to the chief. "Please, just get them out." The chief nodded to his men. The procession began. It was a parade of shame. Brandon, head hung low, defeated. Justin, limping and crying. Nicole, still shouting threats and legal statutes. Megan, weeping for herself and blaming everyone else. They were marched out of the room, one by one, through the heavy steel door and up the stairs. I followed them. I wanted to see it through. I walked up the stairs to the main hallway of the mansion. The front door was wide open. Outside, the driveway was a sea of flashing blue and red lights. Neighbors had gathered at the gates. I could see them peering through the iron bars, holding their phones up, filming. My sons were led out into the daylight. The cold handcuffs glinted in the sun. The neighbors watched in silence as the heirs to the Bennett fortune were shoved into the back of police cruisers like common criminals. Nicole was still screaming as they pushed her into the car. "I am a victim," she yelled to the crowd. "Look at me. I am a victim." The door slammed shut, cutting off her voice. Silence returned to the estate. The heavy engines of the police cars rumbled. One by one, they peeled away, tires crunching on the gravel, taking the rot away from my house. I stood on the porch. The chief stood next to me. "I am sorry it ended like this, Doug," he said quietly. I looked at the empty driveway. I looked at the manicured lawn where my grandchildren used to play. "It didn't end today, Chief," I said. "It ended a long time ago. Today is just the funeral." I turned back to the house. It was empty. It was quiet. But for the first time in a year, it didn't feel haunted. It felt clean. The surgery was over. The tumor was gone. Now, the healing could begin. 1 week after the flashing lights and the sirens faded from my driveway, I sat in the office of Patricia Wells. The room smelled of old leather and expensive coffee. It was a stark contrast to the smell of fear and concrete that had permeated my basement. Patricia sat behind her mahogany desk, her hands folded over a thick document. She looked at me with a mixture of respect and sadness. She had been Catherine's lawyer for 20 years. She knew where the bodies were buried because she had helped dig the graves. "We have executed the final clause of the beekeeper protocol," Patricia said softly. "The assets have been transferred." I nodded, looking out the window at the Chicago skyline. It looked different today, sharper, cleaner. "Read it to me," I said. "I want to hear it out loud. I want to be sure." Patricia put on her reading glasses. She opened the file. Pursuant to the instructions of the late Catherine Bennett and the surviving executor Douglas Bennett, the entirety of the Bennett family estate, including all liquid assets, real estate holdings, and stock portfolios, has been moved into the Generation Skipping Trust. She looked up over her glasses. "It means the money skips a generation, Douglas. It goes right over Brandon and Justin's heads." "Continue," I said. "The beneficiaries of this trust are the 4 grandchildren," Patricia read. "However, access to these funds is heavily restricted. The trust will pay for their education, their health care, and a modest living allowance, but they will not receive a lump sum inheritance until the age of 30, and only upon the condition that they have no criminal record and are gainfully employed." I closed my eyes. I could see my grandchildren. They were innocent in this. They didn't ask for greedy parents. I wasn't going to let them starve, but I wasn't going to let them become Brandon and Justin either. They would have a safety net, not a hammock. And the rest I asked. The remainder of the estate, approximately 60%, has been liquidated and donated to the Catherine Bennett Foundation. Patricia continued. The funds are earmarked for 3 specific causes: legal aid for victims of elder abuse, financial literacy programs for underprivileged youth, and... She paused, a small smile touching her lips, and a grant for the preservation of apiaries and bee populations in North America. I smiled too. Catherine loved her bees. She used to say they were the only creatures that worked hard, protected their queen, and produced something sweet without destroying the flower. And my sons, I asked. What is their status? Patricia's face hardened. She pulled out 2 envelopes. They were stamped with the seal of the county correctional facility. They have been trying to reach you, Douglas. They have been trying to reach anyone. The arraignment was this morning. The judge set bail at $5 million each. Given the flight risk and the severity of the charges, he wasn't lenient. She slid a letter across the desk. It was a copy of the response she had sent to their public defenders an hour ago. I picked it up. It was brief. It was brutal. It was necessary. Dear Mr. Henderson, Acting Counsel for Brandon Bennett, regarding your request for bail assistance from the Bennett Family Trust, please be advised that your client has been formally disinherited. Furthermore, as the trust is currently the primary creditor in a civil suit against your client for fraud and embezzlement, providing bail money would be a conflict of interest. The trust does not fund the defense of those who stole from it. Request denied. I put the letter down. They are sitting in a cell right now waiting for me to walk through the door with a checkbook, I said. They are, Patricia agreed. They still don't believe you would actually leave them there. They think this is a lesson. They don't realize it is a life sentence. I thought about Brandon in his orange jumpsuit. I thought about Justin without his expensive shoes. They were finally living within their means. Their means were 0. Send the letter, I said. And Patricia, add one more thing. Yes, Douglas. Tell them that I have put the mansion on the market. Tell them that the proceeds from the sale will go toward paying back the pension fund they stole from. Tell them that I am selling their childhood home to clean up their adult mess. Patricia nodded, writing it down. That will break them, she said quietly. It already broke me, I said, standing up. Now it is just balancing the ledger. I walked to the door. I had one last stop to make before I left the city. I had a plane ticket in my pocket. But before I could fly, I had to say goodbye to the only person who had stood by me through the fire. I walked out of the law firm and into the bright, harsh light of the afternoon. The air tasted like freedom, but it also tasted like solitude. I was a wealthy man. I was a vindicated man. But as I hailed a taxi to take me to the airport, I felt the heavy truth of my victory. I had won the war, but I had lost the soldiers, and that is a price that no amount of money can ever pay back. But at least, in the silence of my own conscience, I could finally sleep. The bees were safe, the queen was honored, and the drones had been cast out of the hive. The announcement system at O'Hare International Airport chimed with the promise of distant places. Flight 492 to Rome is now boarding. For most people standing at gate K12, that announcement meant a vacation or a business trip. For me, it meant the first breath of air I had taken in 40 years that wasn't filtered through the demands of a company or the greed of ungrateful children. I stood by the large window, watching the Boeing 777 being fueled on the tarmac. I saw my reflection in the glass. I looked different. The lines on my face were still there, deep valleys carved by grief and stress. But my shoulders were lighter. The invisible weight I had been carrying, the weight of a dying wife and a rotting dynasty, was gone. I looked down at my hands. These hands had built skyscrapers. They had cradled babies. And yesterday, they had signed the papers that cemented the incarceration of my own flesh and blood. Some of you listening might think I am a monster. How can a father do that? How can a father turn his back on his sons? But let me ask you this. If you had gangrene in your leg, would you keep it because you were attached to it? Or would you cut it off to save the rest of the body? My sons were not legs. They were not arms. They were a malignancy. They were a tumor that had grown on the spine of this family, feeding on our success and metabolizing it into hatred. Catherine saw it first. She was the surgeon. I was just the instrument. And now that the surgery was over, I felt the phantom pain, but I also felt the rush of survival. I reached into my coat pocket and touched the small velvet box. It wasn't a ring. It was a locket containing a lock of Catherine's hair. We always talked about retiring to Tuscany. We talked about renting a villa on a hill where the only thing that mattered was the quality of the wine and the setting of the sun. We never made it. We were too busy building a legacy for children who wanted us dead. But I am going now, Catherine. I am taking you with me. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the real estate agent. The sign was up. The mansion was listed. The proceeds would go to the pension fund to repay Mrs. Higgins and the factory workers. The neighbors were probably still gossiping about the raid, but I didn't care. That house was a museum of mistakes. I hope the new owners fill it with love, because God knows there wasn't any left in the walls when I walked out. I handed my boarding pass to the attendant. She smiled at me. "Have a nice flight, Mr. Bennett," she said. A stranger was kinder to me in 5 seconds than my daughter-in-law had been in 5 years. And that is the lesson I want to leave you with. We are taught that blood is thicker than water. That is a lie. Blood is just biology. Family is loyalty. Family is respect. Family is the people who stand by you when the walls are hollow and the wolves are at the door. Mike O'Connor, with his sledgehammer, is my family. Patricia Wells with her legal pad is my family. And you listening to this story, you are my witnesses. As I walked down the jet bridge, I didn't look back at the city that held my prison-bound sons. I looked forward. People say revenge is a dish best served cold. They are wrong. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. I already did that. The best revenge is refusing to let them destroy you. The best revenge is buying a one-way ticket to Rome, sitting in a window seat, and ordering champagne because you are finally free. My name is Douglas Bennett. I am 72 years old, and my life is just beginning. We often cling to the myth that family must be preserved at all costs, even when it costs us our soul. But I learned that shared blood is not a license for abuse. True loyalty is earned, not inherited. By cutting off my sons, I didn't destroy my family. I saved the integrity of what my family was supposed to be. Catherine taught me that the ultimate act of love is sometimes letting people face the consequences of their own greed. Never set yourself on fire just to keep others warm. Peace is always better than a toxic inheritance. If you agree that respect is earned and not given, hit that like button. And tell me in the comments below, would you have forgiven Brandon and Justin? Or would you have let the timer run out? Subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. See you in the next video.